All right, I'm here with Sonia. She's a student, an expert of polyvagal theory, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm super excited to talk to her about it. I did not know about polyvagal theory until she introduced it to me. I've watched a few videos on it, and it's pretty fascinating. And so I'm definitely excited to talk about it today. And if you wouldn't mind, could you kind of talk about why you got interested in polyvagal theory and how it's benefited you and others?
Okay. So I would love to be an expert in polyvagal theory, but
You're getting there.
I think I would have to study a lifetime to be an expert. But
It's that deep, huh? Okay.
yeah, it's that deep. But polyvagal theory is the basis of the scientific basis of investigation of all somatic work that you see a little bit around the world, and everyone talks about somatics. And I found polyvagal theory on my trauma practitioner training in somatic experience. So it is one of the basis, scientific basis, that the founder of somatic experience and the investigator of this therapeutic approach, Peter Levine, um, explains to us the phenomena and the symptoms of the body based on the scientific research of Stephen Porges. They are actually very close friends,
Oh,
actually.
I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
and they
interesting.
start the work. It's really funny when they talk about their history because they started a little bit the work together, and Peter Levine went much more to the therapeutic side, and Stephen Porges much more to the investigating side. But they cross paths around their career, and they are still great friends today. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. It's not like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. They
No.
they're not
No,
stepping
no.
on each other's toes.
No,
Okay.
no, no. Just one specializes in the therapeutic approach, and the other one in the scientifical research, actually.
Okay. So, just for people who aren't familiar with somatic therapy, somatic conditioning, could you give just a very brief definition of that?
Yeah, well, the somatic work, the somatic comes from soma, that means body. Okay, so all the somatic work, it's focus on sensations. Some of the approaches are more familiar with the nervous system. Other approaches are going to be much more familiar with sensations in the muscles, joining all emotions, but it all comes to the physiology, you know?
Mm,
So it all comes to the constitution of our bodies, which it seems so abstract on these days because we are so much in the mind and so much in the
yeah.
cognition and rational way of living, which is, I don't think it's bad because we are different from the rest of the mammals. And one of the things that distinguish us is the cognition. It's this faculties of the mind. The thing is that we forget the mammal side of our beings. And I think this leaves us very vulnerable, actually, instead of being more strong. We lose a part of ourselves, actually, because this is a two-road map. You know, you have information that comes from the mind to the body, or the brain through the body, if you prefer, or from the brain through the nervous system, if you prefer. But you have the contrary too. And this two road needs to be, I mean, clean. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And
yeah.
what I feel today is that the road of information, body, brain, is not very clean. It's very unclear and it's very suppressive and leaves us very vulnerable to a bunch of symptoms that could be avoided. It could be prevented if we recover this body knowledge, this soma knowledge, you know?
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, yeah. My PhD is technically in physiology and pharmacology, but yeah, it's amazing the mind body connection. So the stomach I find the most fascinating. It's the only other part of the body that has neurons, and so there's like literally there's a direct pathway between the brain and the stomach, and that's why when people say, "Oh, I can feel it in my gut," like literally you can. Like you've actually got neurons because that process of moving food through your body
Mm-hmm.
requires a very rhythmic, controlled motion, and so it's another reason when you feel stressed or when you feel upset, nervous, it's you feel it in your stomach
Mm-hmm.
because you got a bunch of neurons down there, and so it's definitely something that um, I'm glad that people are focusing on because yeah, if your body's messed up, it's going to affect your brain directly, especially your
Mm-hmm.
stomach, like inflammation in the gut and that kind of thing. That'll mess up your brain real fast, and a lot of anxiety and stress and stuff. You think, and like you said, it can be the inverse,
Mm-hmm.
where your brain's affecting your stomach, but your stomach's also affecting your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Where if um, you have bad gut health or you have inflammation in that area, then it's going to go the other way, right? So it's a
Mm-hmm.
two-way street, and then you think you're like, oh man, I have such bad mental health, and I'm so stressed, and my life is so hard,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And maybe it is, but it could just be like your stomach's messed up,
Yeah.
and it's directly messing with your brain. So
Yes. Yes.
that's it. Do they talk about that in soma theory at all, like the
Yes,
stomach
like
itself?
one of the principles, I don't know if I heard from Stephen Porges directly or from Peter Levine, it's one of the two, but the vagus nerve has a road of 80% of the circulation of the information comes bottom up.
Oh
So
wow,
can you
okay.
imagine 20% from the brain to the body, 80% of the information
Going up.
going up. And when you talked about the stomach, I think they have studies also that we have neurons actually in all the terminations of the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve, it goes around all the organs and connects organs, muscles, articulations, and the brain. And those connections need to have neurons. So, from that principle on, I'm not an expert, but I could imagine that all the organs have some kind of neurons to be able to communicate through
Communicate and go back and forth.
through the vagus nerve. Okay,
Oh,
and
that's
and it's
fascinating.
and it's very useful because nature um, has a primal function, makes us live and make the species thrive, right? So the preservation of the species, it's the primal function. And
Yeah.
actually is the primal function of the autonomous nervous system. He only works on that. So he only has two, well, polyvagal theory brings three forms of doing it, but or he's tracking safety or he's tracking danger. And this is very useful for preservation of our life. That's why in the vagus nerve, which is a big part of our autonomous nervous system, the information 80% it's bottom up, you
Bottom
know?
up. Yeah.
And this needs to be in our equation as humans, you know? Not saying that it's more important the mind, it's more important the body. No, what is important, it's both being in the equation, actually, with the weight that they have. Because we have instinct as mammals, we have sensations and emotions, limbic system, and then we have cognition.
Mm-hmm.
And this has an order of deepnesses. So I put my hand here, but the strongest response to an environment is the instinctive one.
Oh, for sure.
For those three, if the instinct of surviving is here, it's going to be like we're going to do anything to survive.
Yeah.
That's why some people that pass by shock trauma or see some horrible trauma, they have some behaviors that they are ashamed of after, because the instinct comes and they act through the survival instinct, and this
Yeah.
needs to be in our equation as humans,
That's really
not
cool.
not as a separate thing that doesn't belong to us because we are rational beings. No, we have that instinct, and he works in a certain way, you know? So
Oh, for
every
sure.
time he feels that you are in danger, he's going to have three types of response, and you're not going to be able to control it, you
Oh,
know?
definitely. That sounds it sounds kind of Darwinist almost. I think
It
Charles
is.
Darwin
It is.
Darwin would like this
Yeah,
theory
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure,
Yeah,
where it's
yeah,
like,
it
oh, the
is.
person has to survive. So, how how can we apply this? So, like, for people who have trauma and that kind of stuff. So if the body and mind are connected, let's say a person has really bad childhood trauma from
Hmm.
abuse or alcoholism or something like that. What can be done using somatic therapy or polyvagal theory to help these people?
Well, you have to separate it in two worlds. One is childhood trauma, and another world is shock trauma. So, for instance, shock trauma is an event that is too overwhelmed. It happens once and activates your instinct, activates your autonomous nervous system, and you're going to have a response of self protection: fight, flight, or freeze and collapse.
Hmm.
Okay. But childhood trauma, it's not something that happens once. It's
Yeah.
something that happens a week, every day for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, and becomes a part of your personality. So
Hmm.
we are talking about character structures. So the two traumas are treatable in different ways. What happened a lot of the times is that you have complex trauma, which is a shock between the development in the development stage when you were a child. Okay. So this complex needs to be treated in a very specific way. You cannot treat all at once with one, one solution,
Okay.
one pill. No, this is not
It takes
possible.
time.
It
Takes
takes
time.
time. So polyvagal theory focus on the autonomous nervous system. So it's very useful for us to understand shock trauma, okay? And to understand how the instinct works. And it's basically three types of response. So the way our nervous system is here now, you and me, we are in ventral vagal mode. It's like a light on the traffic. We are in the green light, in the green zone, which means I feel my breath. I can feel my feet on the ground. I'm in connection to you. We are talking. You are receiving information. We are processing information. We can imagine some things related to this information. So, this is the ventral vagal state of the autonomous nervous system. This should be the state that we live most of our time. Okay.
Okay.
But suddenly in this podcast, you have someone that enters in the back of you at your
It's got a
room.
knife. No.
Not a knife, but like, I don't know, a kid, for example,
Oh, okay.
a kid that opens the door. First response of the nervous system is like, what it is. Okay, so we pass to the yellow stage, which is sympathetic mode. Okay, it's like, okay, should I fight? Should I flight? What should I do to protect? And you look back and you see that it's your kid, and you say, oh, okay,
Mhm.
that's okay. And you come back to the green zone. And this should be the resilience and the flexibility that we should have, all of us. Okay? We should live in this stage of, I can be able to be activated on sympathetic mode to see the danger because we need to protect ourselves, right? But
Right.
having the ability and the flexibility to coming back to the green zone. And this is healthy. This is an autonomous nervous system that is healthy. But imagine now that it's not your kid and it's someone with a knife. Okay? You activate in the yellow zone and you cannot fight, you cannot flight, and you freeze. Then we enter the red zone. And this red zone, it's very difficult to understand because this is what polyvagal theory brings us to us. We had a vision of the nervous system of two modes, sympathetic mode and parasympathetic mode. And the polyvagal theory brings us ventral vagal mode, sympathetic mode, and dorsal vagal mode. So the freeze and the collapse, the red zone, comes from the dorsal vagal, which is a part of our vagus nerve that we inherited from reptile. What a
Hmm.
reptile does to defend. He masks in the nature. Have you observed? They
Yeah.
change color.
Plays dead. Yeah.
He plays
Disappears.
that. Is still right. So we have still that ability in our autonomous nervous system, which is not all bad because this red zone is also responsible. The dorsal vagal is also responsible for our digestion and our
Oh.
sleep.
Well, there you
So we
go.
need
Yeah.
that immobility to sleep and rest. Right? And we need to
Right.
rest to digest. And we have another beautiful, because I love this image, another beautiful moment that we see that immobility is you have kids, you certainly have lived those moments. A newborn collapsing in the arms of mom. And you see,
Yeah.
you know, the neck. So it's this deliverance and total trust to another human being that shows us that in our instinct, we are beings of connection. So, polyvagal theory brings us this uh, vision that safety, it's not a luxury. Feeling safe, it's a basic necessity of our
Mm.
autonomous nervous system. And that safety is connected to connection to one another,
I see.
you know?
So with the childhood trauma, then how would you go about making the person feel safe? Like,
So
would you say?
in the first stage, you need to stabilize the autonomous nervous system to go to childhood trauma. And then you work with the character structures, which is much more complex. It's between relating muscles to ego aspects to ego functions. And that comes from another psychotherapy called biodynamic, which I'm finishing the first year. It's very
Oh.
fascinating. It's a Danish approach. And it's from a woman that observed the behavior of collapse muscles and tense muscles in adults and then in development child. So she observed the muscles that the child will use to develop in the several stages and related that to psychological functions in emotions. and abilities of the self, abilities of our ego. So childhood trauma is a little bit more complex
Okay.
to
Takes a
address.
okay. Is it a lot of talking? Is it a lot of hugging? Um what would you is like
It's
exercises?
talking the right thing with the right muscle activation, with the right
Oh wow.
emotion, and some exercises, yes, because the vision of body dynamic is that in childhood, trauma childhood is you missed the opportunity to learn something about yourself. For some reason, you didn't have the conditions to learn what were your needs, for example, you know? So you don't know. And a lot of people don't know. They go to
Yeah.
in a group in a restaurant. You know those people that go in group to a restaurant and ask, "What are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? I'm going to eat that too. I'm going to eat that too." They're not in tune of what they want. They mirror their own needs to another. And this is very automatic because this is something that we learn between 1 month and 8 months. Can you imagine?
Wow, no way.
It's like it's much more complex because it became a part of that personality, you know? So it's two different worlds. But in childhood trauma, you need to have a resilient nervous system and you need to be able to have this flexibility between activation and coming back to the green zone and activation and coming back to the green zone. But the problem is with those three stages is that all of us, we have suffer a kind of shock trauma because
Yeah.
shock trauma, it's not what happened to you. It's the fixation that
Yeah.
stayed, the memory that stayed in your soma, in your
Yeah.
somatic, you know?
Yeah, and you can't get it out, and
And
so
you
it's like
can get it out.
permanently
It's some
debilitating
fixation.
you. Yeah.
Exactly. In the autonomous nervous system, it's like a fixation that your nervous system is going to continue to search for danger in this direction. You know,
Yeah.
so for example, you had an accident, a car accident. I have a client that came to see me because of a pain in their shoulder that wouldn't disappear. Very young, 23 years old, very healthy. She tried everything, did all the exams, went to several doctors, nothing, but the sensation was there. So we
Oh
started,
wow.
yeah, we started to work. In the second session, she reminded that she had a car accident exactly in this side, you know? But the thing is, we are so intelligent to survive. Our nervous system is so intelligent that she told me like this, well, it was my sister that was driving. I was on this way and we had the accident. But I was like, I didn't feel a lot of things. I went out to the car, I called the insurance, and 2 hours after I was working. And I said to her, but how the car in that side? Because she was not driving, right? She was
Yeah, no
co-pilot.
control. Yeah.
Oh, the car was destroyed.
Oh my gosh.
So what happened in her nervous system? This is too much. I'm going to freeze, collapse, and dissociate from the sensation. So our work was bringing her to the sensation in very small doses. We call that in somatic experience titration.
Oh. Yeah.
For her to build and hold, I'm safe and I'm in contact with this uncomfortable sensation, but I'm safe at the same time in a presence that is regulated. That in this case was me, but normally is the therapist. And so the body, when the body trusts, when the nervous system trusts, it starts to um, decharge the sympathetic charge that was fixed there, which is something that wild animals know how to do, and we know how to do. But as we lived in society, domesticate society, we forget. So this probably must be shocking, but a lot of the shock trauma that we humans have, it's because we don't allow our nervous system to discharge. Because
Mm.
discharging sympathetic charge could look like yawning, barking, shaking, crying. How society sees that, those kinds of reaction. Oh my
Yeah.
God, no, crying.
It's like, hey,
Like,
get back to work, you bum. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that happen in our lives, humans, sometimes for a person that listens to the story, it's not that much. But the charge state in a situation at work, in a situation at home, and it's going to be in and in, and it starts to lose, your nervous system starts to lose resilience, and instead of finding safety, starts to like tracking danger all the time. So our nervous system pendulates between the green zone and the light zone. We call that pendulation, and this is healthy between pleasant sensations and unpleasant sensations, some of activation, some lower activation. This is life, this is dynamic. But as you have fixation after fixation without discharging that charge, your nervous system starts to pendulate with a small space. And so it becomes the adult that sees triggers in everything.
Oh yeah.
So
Very
we
short fuse.
very short views, everything is a trigger because the body is so charged with stress. So for me, the work that I envision and that I offer to my clients, it's really first things first. We need to discharge the nervous system. We don't need to understand all the shock trauma because, when you discharge, it doesn't matter the history. It
Mm.
matters that you release the somatic memory, and that your nervous system is not stuck there. And you gain resilience, and your nervous system starts to pendulate in a very slow way, pleasant, unpleasant, with a lot of space. So everything that happens in life, it's not anymore a trigger. You have space to pendulate between green zone, yellow zone, with much more ease. And it's normally on this phase that the childhood trauma starts to come because it's part of your personality. So you have more space in your nervous system to look at things in your personality that you say, oh my gosh, I continue to repeat exactly the same thing all my life and this
Yeah.
behavior all my life. But you need to have space in your nervous system and stability first to look at yourself. Without that, it's very difficult because you have a lot of symptoms, that can be in a variety of symptoms. It depends from person to person. It's very unique.
Come out in strange ways. So you're saying, like, as far as the trauma is concerned, it's not necessarily ruminating and bringing it out through talk therapy. It's basically like making the person feel safe, that they don't need to be in that state all the time. Is that
Mm-hmm.
is that kind of
Yeah.
the point?
The biggest point is trusting the physiology because our bodies know how to do that.
How to clean it out and just
Yeah. Yeah. But
let your body do it?
yeah. But because it's so scary and because we are mammals of connection, we need another person to do it. Sometimes you can assist an horrible trauma, but if you are hands to hands with someone that you love, you don't get traumatized because you are in connection. So this work is very rooted on the connection between the professional and the client with a container, with boundaries, with limits, but um, to create a space that the physiology of the client, the automatic physiology, can trust on the physiology of the therapist. So the therapist needs to do his own work, of course.
Right. To unlock that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without getting too weird on you. So when I was doing my PhD, I did a lot of it's called confocal microscopy. But anyway, basically zoom in on the very, very small.
Hmm.
And I would look at genes and proteins and different things that were moving around in the cell, right?
Okay.
Um, and what's interesting is if you zoom out, it kind of looks a lot like civilization, a cell does. So like they have different like road pathways and that kind of stuff. Anyway, for cells to function properly, they need other cells next to them, right? Otherwise, things go bad real fast. And so, looking at society, especially with like the invention of the internet and just reading and writing and all that, I think we're getting to the point where we're all super connected and we're all kind of like cells in a giant body.
Hmm.
And I feel that, like when you were talking about how, you need another person, I think we're kind of like cells in a giant organism. And if we're not talking to each other, then we're going haywire, right?
Hmm.
And so I know they've proven that talking with people reduces cortisol levels and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But I do feel that even like a tribe or a city or something like that, they're kind of smaller versions of this super organism or whatever you want to call it. But I do feel that uh, to sync up with society and to be part of it, we need to talk with people. And if we're not talking with people, if we're not being a part of society, then it really messes with us, right? Because we
Yeah.
get out of sync. I did a lot of work on cardiomyocytes, which are cells of the heart. And even you pull them out of the heart and you kind of put them next to each other, they start to beat in sync. And so I
Can you
think
imagine? That
in
is
in a dish,
wonderful. Wow.
crazy, right?
It's crazy.
It's like an electrical signal,
Yeah.
but I think that's the same with humans. I think um,
But it
we kind of
is.
rely on each other.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. The ventral vagus state. It's a part of the vagus nerve. So vagus, it goes on all of our
All the
bodies,
way through.
but he starts here, and you have to. What Stephen Porges found out. Let me see if I say that correctly, because I'm not a scientist at all.
Oh yeah.
But you have a part that starts much more in the back, a part of that nerve that goes down and around our viscera. Okay, this is the dorsal side. Okay,
Mm.
the one that we inherited from reptiles. That's why rest and digest, uh, freeze and collapse, it's protecting the viscera. And we have another part that is a little bit more lateral, which is common to all mammals, actually, not just us, all mammals that survive in group, that goes to innervate all our face and all our lungs and heart. So from here and from here is the ventral vague green zone that we talked about. So it's talking, face expression,
Oh.
and heart. You know, when we are in sync with the living being, because yes, we can descend to this relaxed green zone with another person. But what is amazing is that our ventral vagal nerve, uh, part of vagus nerve, can sync also in nature because he feels the pulse.
Ah.
It's a living being, even if it's a tree, even if it's a rock. He feels the living being. That's why being in nature is so healthy for us. It calls that
Syncs you up.
phenomena, yeah, that phenomena he calls co-regulation. So I co-regulate my ventral vagal with yours. And it's through the heart. It's true. And then it's true. The face expression, the voice, he nerves all this, you know? So in the
Oh, that's
mammals,
interesting.
you have, for example, dolphins that they are in group and each mom has a sound to their kids, a different sound, a specific different sound that the kid is going to recognize. This is my mom.
And they can sync up that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think just kind of like the cardiomyocytes, the heart cells. I feel like
It's amazing.
if we're communicating with each other, we do kind of sync up, and it kind of helps us get
Of
back
course.
into rhythm. No
Yeah,
pun intended there, but
yeah.
that's interesting. So, is there an example? I know you talked about the car accident one, but where polyvagal theory, somatic therapy. Am I saying that right? Somatic therapy
Yeah, because there is
has
many approach
many approaches to it.
in different authors. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. An example that really helps someone where if it's not your own practice, if it's another example, that's fine too. But where it's really kind of cured and fix someone, maybe not cured is the right word, but help them significantly.
I think the first step that we need to remind ourselves is that when we have a trigger, we need safety. And it's not thinking that I'm safe, is feeling safe.
Feeling safe.
And the first thing that makes us feel safe, it's another loving human being. So if it's possible, another human being, it's the most fast way to self-regulate from a trigger, you know. But if we have a pet, is also a great thing. I
That's
co-regulate a lot with my dog.
yeah.
She is a part of my work. I have clients that I receive in Lisbon. I do a hybrid work between international clients, and I have some Portuguese clients. And when they come, part of the experience of the session, Naya, she's helping me.
You bring out the dog, be like this will be
She stays in the room, and for the client it's very important that she's there. And like
oh, I believe it.
sometimes
Yeah.
in some points of the session, she gets up and she syncs with a client, and for her it's like coming back to the green zone and discharging. So they have this faculty of reminding us of the pulse of the green zone. So I would say feeling safe, it's the first step, you know, not thinking that I'm safe, feeling
Actually
safe.
feeling like making your environment safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't don't watch too many scary movies.
That could be an influence. Or if you cannot be in an environment, because I mean, this is not, the world is not perfect. We don't have everything that we want in life. Of course, we need to make choices. And sometimes we are in an environment at work that it's not safe,
Yeah,
but we can
toxic.
create some safety around it, some kind of boundaries around it for us, you know? And a lot of what I see in my practice is that people cannot understand what a boundary is. A boundary is different from a limit, but a boundary doesn't separate me from you. A boundary is the point of the connection with you. If I go until here and I don't let you come more, I'm prepared to connect to you from here. You
Oh,
know, we have a not just a limit boundary, but an emotional, relational boundary. And a lot of the problems that I see is that people don't have the notion of their emotional boundary, emotional and energetic boundary. you know, and they think that putting a boundary, I'm going to harm the other person or separate myself from the other person. But it's only the contrary. I want to
Mm.
meet you here because from here I feel invaded. But in here, I'm in connection. I'm in my individuality. You are in your individuality, and we can meet each other here.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's more like it's almost like a meeting zone rather
Yeah,
than a keep away from me type thing.
exactly, exactly,
Okay. It's
exactly,
like they're
exactly.
setting up a rendezvous to meet up and talk rather than
Yeah.
straight up, restraining order or something. I guess that's why they don't call it a restraining boundary or something
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
take to that extreme. So I know in a lot of people with trauma and different events, they have a different epigenetic profile. So like their methylation patterns are different. I don't know if you're too familiar you are with epigenetics, but
A little
um,
bit.
a little bit. Okay. You can't change your epigenetics over time through like healthy living and trauma, but it's hard, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's why a lot of people that's why there's like cycle of abuse and that kind of stuff, because it's literally modifying how your genes are read in your body,
Hmm.
right? That's what epigenetics is. So it's like blocking off artistic creativity, it's
Yeah.
opening up aggression and violence and that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I think that's because, not to get too Darwin on you, but it's because you think you're in a hostile world, right? You're in a
Yeah.
hostile environment, and so, well, I better turn off creativity, I should turn on aggression because I've got to fight to survive in this
Hmm.
world. Um, in your experience, is a lot of this stuff kind of like drug addiction or alcoholism, where it's a part of them their whole life, but they can control it? Or is it something they can completely jettison, get rid of from their mind and their body? Can they ever completely remove it, or is it always going to be a part of them and they just have to learn to deal with it?
It's very difficult, your question, because it's very
All right, yeah,
general.
well, I don't know the
It's
answer,
very
so yeah.
it's very general, and I
So it
think
depends.
the individual, because where does that addiction comes from? It's from a shock trauma or a childhood trauma. In what age of that child? So the more earlier, of course, the more challenging, you know, because there was no cognition. I mean, we start to have cognition around memory, I guess, like 5, 6 years old. Before
Yeah,
that, we have the limbic system that is developing, and before that, we have the instinct.
yeah,
So the limbic system starts around one year, 1 year and a half. It's when the child starts to express and experiment some emotions, So we need to see case by case,
case by case.
case by case. That's why I don't do a lot of group works. I like to
Oh,
talk and I like to inform groups, but for me, the transformation comes from the experience because the knowledge. I mean, I believe that we all can have access to the knowledge that we want today. My gosh, with AI and everything, we
yeah, it's
can we
unreal.
can do all the formations of the world, all the courses that we want in any language that we want. But the experience is the thing that is going to transform. And to thrive to the experience, we need a guide. That is
Mm,
not the superhero, not the superhero, but he's some steps forward. You, So when you encounter a trigger, when you encounter a difficult, you can have his help to come back to the green zone. You know. So this
I see.
coming back to the green zone and touching in a very titrated doses way, those traumas is very important. And we need to see the origin. And sometimes the origin is not clear for the adult because it doesn't remember, or sometimes comes from a stage of development where there is no cognition, just sensation, and started there. So how do you go there? You go there by a somatic education first, by making the person trust his own physiology, because nature wants us to live. Like nature just have a role, finding life.
Yeah.
That's all nature does. So our physiology is always seeking for life, always. So your physiology is not going to make accessible something that puts your life in danger.
Yeah.
So I trust the physiology for that. You know, she's only going to open what she's capable of handling, you know, in a safe
So
space with a co-regulator,
yeah.
So it's a
So
long
it's like
road and it's a very specific.
very specific. I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, yeah. So it's basically like resetting the person to understand that they're not in this hostile world, and they can
Yeah.
be, open and safe and kind and nice, and they're not going to be ridiculed or beat
And that
down.
a
And
lot of the triggers are in reality memories. Even if they are somatic memories, they are memories. The thing with shock trauma, the problem with shock trauma is that the person has the trigger and she's pulled out of the present and goes to the moment of the shock, So that person, the physiology of that person needs to understand with the cognition that this is a somatic memory. But
it's
she's
more
much
physical.
more, yeah, she's much more than that memory. So she
Interesting.
has the resilience of not being pulled out when she has the trigger, but
Yeah.
handling safe space and a little bit of the unpleasant sensation, you know?
Yeah, I watched those videos that you sent me, and in one of them it was really fascinating. It was like a Marine who was shell shocked, and
Yeah.
literally their state of mind was, I can't move, like,
Hmm.
and it was only through physical touch, like another grunt or whatever came up and like shook his boot and was like, hey, like, you gotta wake up. And I think that's a really good example of, definitely the most extreme example, I think, of
Hmm.
this is extremely unsafe where I am right now. I better not move or I'm gonna get shot in the head.
Hmm.
And so I think, yeah, I think in modern life we have different degrees of that, where it's like, oh, like this is a really scary, dangerous environment.
Yeah.
Like, I better freeze up, and maybe, I don't want to minimize anybody's experiences, but maybe their brain might even be playing a trick on them, where it's like, this isn't as dangerous as you think it is, but your mind thinks it is, and so you have to find a way to
But if your
make people
mind
think
think it
they're like
is,
that.
your body
Yeah,
reacts.
it's as real as anything else, right? It's as real as
Exactly,
somebody,
exactly. And let
as
me
a
point it
tiger in the
out.
bush.
Yeah, and let me point it out. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but it's a big
No,
idea.
no. Yeah,
It's
no,
a big
please,
idea.
no.
It's something
Yeah,
important is that in our modern life, we have this dimension of the virtual world and the 3D world, and our nervous system is not rewired for that. We
can't tell
don't,
the difference.
it can tell the difference. It doesn't have the notion of time, past, future, and it doesn't have the notion of virtual and 3D. So we don't know the result of this. Of course, humanity is going to adapt, but I advise my clients to have some boundaries around the time that they spend in screens. and
Oh
what
yeah.
type of information that they select to come, because we spend a lot of time in our screens. And this
Yeah.
is very recent. This has what, 20 years, 15 years? It's very recent.
Yeah.
So the state of alert of a person that is all day on the screen reading news that pops up without her own will to come, it's completely different from a state of mind that a person that goes to YouTube podcasts with interesting subjects, the nervous system reacts in a very different way. So
Oh, for sure.
some boundaries, it's like a relationship. You need to have a relationship with your phone today,
Yeah.
in
I
in a
know.
in a
Yeah.
kind of one that is very responsible, knowing that our nervous systems were not made for this.
Like a
So
mental war almost.
yeah, so
It's
we need to module the kind of activation. I put boundaries around screening. Yeah, like
you put
every,
people. Is it a specific type of screen, like what's on the screen, or you say just in general? Like, for I know a lot of people, social media they feel is just toxic, especially to young people, where
yeah,
and it probably puts them in that yellow zone a lot of the time because they're seeing, oh,
exactly.
why didn't I get invited to that party, or I must be doing something wrong because as a species we're very social, and if you're seeing all these people getting together having fun, and you probably get into this yellow, maybe even red zone, where you're like, oh, these people are having fun without me. I'm part of this tribe. I'm part of this community. I need to do something about it. And I'm going to stress about this
Hmm.
because, you know, there's these people doing things without me, or, they're living this life or doing this, and they're only putting, their best face forward in that. And so I can totally see how, if you're on, Instagram or Facebook, and you just see these, they're looking through rose colored glasses of the whole world, and you're like, well, my life's not like that, or like,
Hmm.
oh, my experiences aren't like that, I need to fix that. And then you can never achieve that because it's not real.
Hmm.
And so
Exactly.
so um getting back to my original question, would you say it's just screen time in general, or is it like what's on the screen?
First step of boundaries, it's time screen, you know?
Just generally all together, yeah.
Generally, like it's very bad for our sleep. It's very
Yeah.
bad for melatonin production, So having some boundaries around that, seeing the 3D world, real
Mm,
people, real
yeah.
life. This is the first step. And then the selection of what you receive.
Selection.
I turn it off all notifications of my phone. I
That's smart.
only have WhatsApp because my clients can
Yeah, I know,
access to
you
my
can't get
WhatsApp.
totally away.
No, not
I
totally away, but
I want to.
it's
Yeah.
the only, not Facebook, not Instagram. I go there and I choose to go there. And this is very
Not let them pull
empowering.
you in with their
Yeah.
notifications and their, yeah, or like their Instagram reels, or their
Yeah.
mind control machines that they've developed to get your eyeballs on there.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's funny.
have some kind of control. Like I turn it off all the info news from the phone. I access when I want to know the news,
Oh, that's smart.
you
Yeah,
know?
definitely. I think apps, you should remove them all, and just have your web browser or whatever, and then you can go when you want to, and that way they can't harass you. I know Google and stuff is trying to add notifications, and so it's like, because they figured that out, that people, you just shut off all notifications, and it's like, well, we can
Mhm.
get them through the browser. Like, not so fast, we'll get you, because their whole business model is eyeballs and marketing and all that. So
Yeah.
they got to make a living somehow, I guess. But no, I agree, and I can tell you're a lot happier for it. And I think, um, and I've seen people who literally, they don't even have a phone, and I don't know how they get away with it. They just have a landline, and they have so much more peace in their life,
It is.
and like they're just generally, like, you can tell they're like a normal human being, rather than whatever we've become with all these screens and notifications.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, getting on social media, like some of it's useful, and it's useful for connecting with people, but I can almost feel it that it's bad, like it's
Yeah.
toxic, it's bad for me, it's like a
Yeah.
bad drug.
It's very dual in as a construction, an idea that comes from a human being. We are ambiguous beings. We are beings that can hold two antagonic emotions at the same time, in
Define
ourselves.
and define antagonic for me.
Paradoxical emotions.
A paradoxical. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Romantic relationships, and around relationships we can see a lot of that, right? I
Yeah.
know that this person is bad for me, but still I want to go. And and we are like this, and social media as a creation of human species is not different. You have the good side and you have the bad side. So it's part of our society today, as to us the responsibility to choose wisely what is good or bad for us. That is good and it's bad is a fact. I agreed with you.
Mm,
But we can have a word on it. But we need to get in tune to our physiology, in tune to us, to understand where is the boundary, where is the limit, when it's good and when it's bad for me,
mm,
and
yeah.
choosing wisely. So it's a lot about the consumer because they are here. I mean, they're not going to get away, they're not going to disappear, you know.
Yeah.
It's like being a little bit um observer of the effect that social media or screens have on my physiology. And
Just
then
being in touch with it.
because even the son of Stephen Porges, they wrote a book together. It's a very funny story. And he explains polyvagal theory in a much more simple language because the father is an academic. So, very complicated language. And
Yeah.
he talks about how social media and internet comes us a lot to the yellow zone, sympathetic a lot of time. Yellow
I
zone,
believe
yellow
it.
zone, yellow
Yeah.
zone, yellow zone. And at some point, some people get anxious, freeze, and collapse,
Wow. I
because it's
100% believe
so
it. Yeah.
many times. So this is this is the thing. It's is it bad, the social media, internet? Not necessary, but we need to have boundaries around it. We need to be
Yeah.
responsible for us around it and use it
Yeah.
wisely.
Yeah, probably use it almost as a tool for real
Exactly.
interaction, rather than just using it as a substitute for human
Yeah.
interaction. Use it to invite people over, basically, like stay in touch or whatever. But
Yeah.
and then yeah, I wish it was more just like a Rolodex or a database for contacting people, and
Mm.
it is fun to like see pictures of people and post pictures, but sometimes I think it does mess with people where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
where's my invitation? Or like, hey, like, but you can't be invited to everything, and people
Yeah.
have their own lives and things like that. But I think it does mess with our innate need to be around other people all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we're you know in the cool kids group or whatever, we're because otherwise, if you're not social, uh, anthropologically speaking, you're going to get eaten by the lion because you're not at the herd,
Mm-hmm.
and so you need to be together with other people, and then seeing those things happen, you're like, oh man,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something's wrong with me. But well, that's about an hour. I,
It
I
is.
I would like to go longer, but I promised I wouldn't take too much of your time, and I have to go pick up my kid. But
Hmm.
yeah, but yeah, thank you so much, Sonia. This has been super informative and super helpful. It's a big world out there, is what I'm finding. Like, this is super useful information, and more people should know it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So
Well,
probably
that's why we are here, you know.
we're doing our best.
We are doing our best, and
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's a great vehicle, you know, the podcast and this informal conversations that people can rely on. This is the good side of
yeah,
internet, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm lousy at marketing. I'm great with people, but lousy at marketing. And this is the one thing that I love to do to, you know, spread the word if someone
yeah,
resonates, because it's more real, it's a conversation, and you
yeah.
spread useful information, and the person can pick up this and apply to their lives, you know. So this is the good side of internet too. And
Yeah, guess I shouldn't bash it too bad.
yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be a filter. Only real
Yeah.
discussions, not artificially produced
Yeah.
gunk or
Exactly.
whatever.